The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. At that time, Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. Now a man there named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man, was seeking to see who Jesus was. But he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." And Zacchaeus came down quickly and received him with joy. When they all saw this, they began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to stay at the house of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Sudden swings of mood, victory snatched from the jaws of defeat, defeat snatched from the jaws of victory, are not just the privilege of the football fan. They figure in gospel stories like the one we've just heard of Zacchaeus and Jesus' encounter in Jericho. For Zacchaeus, a tax collector, collaborator with hated occupiers in his homeland, would have been despised by his fellow Jews. His only security, the hated Romans who employed him. Always on guard, fragile, vulnerable, tense, nervous, never able to relax, lonely. No wonder Jesus, who had a reputation for reaching out to people like him, attracted his curiosity. And Jesus, coming upon him up in the tree, doesn't just invite himself, but demands to be welcomed into Zacchaeus' home. We don't hear what the meal that night must have been like, but what a feast it must have been. A life so wretched transformed by a welcome so great. The distance, geographic and spiritual, between Zacchaeus and Jesus, between Zacchaeus and his own people, bridged by Christ's invitation, "I must eat at your house tonight." Christ has redeemed Zacchaeus' past, transformed his present, redirected his future. This is an interesting gospel for a weekend like this, not just because of the football game we enjoyed or endured, When we think about mission, the church's activity, participating in God's mission in the world, Jesus sent, the Spirit still sent. We know the mission of God is to make everywhere Jericho, so that every Zacchaeus welcomes Christ into his home, or her home, or their home. The mission of God is to make everyone know that Christ wants to make a home with us in our work, in our homes, in our families, in our leisure, in our quiet, in our mirth. The Congregation of Holy Cross, which founded Notre Dame, has always sought to bridge distances, to make connections across gulfs. We came from France in 1842 to this spot to found Notre Dame, and we've sought to make Christ home here. And sisters, brothers, and priests of Holy Cross soon went all over the world. So we now have another college called Notre Dame in Bangladesh. It's the best school in a country about the size of Indiana that has 140 million people, nearly all of them Muslim. Notre Dame University, Bangladesh. This Holy Cross school, you likely know best, is not so far from Lake Michigan, about a half an hour. We have another school, smaller, not yet so famous, on the north shore of Lake Victoria in Jinja, Uganda, where the Nile River starts its meandering path into Egypt. That school, like this one, is the work of Holy Cross sisters, brothers, and priests who want to make Christ home there for the students and the parish in which that school rests. God's mission in the world takes deep embodiment in the life of the church in forms we all know well. Churches like this one, parishes, schools, hospitals, efforts like peacemaking and educating and healing. And the church everywhere must be tended and extended by all of us. We must heed the call to go to the ends of the earth, and we must mind the bridges that need to be built close by. For mission really isn't the church's Office of Foreign Affairs, it's State Department. It's what God is doing to make a home for Christ everywhere that's happening. And each of us is called to participate in it as we are able. For it is certainly the case that most of the world's missionaries, people who have walked with others, who've moved from unbelief to belief, have been parents. Parents sharing their faith with their children. Thank you, parents, for that work, which is hard. Thank you, children, for doing that work with your own children. It will be harder. But it is the only way the church continues to exist, one generation to the next. For Christians are not born. They are made when bridges are built and Christ finds a new home. The hardest work in mission is thus not going far and learning a new language so that you can communicate to people you've never met. The hardest work in mission is to allow the grace of God to help you figure out how to touch those closest to you. Not the 5,000 miles to Bangladesh or Uganda, but the few feet, the listening ear, the thoughtful conversation, the gracious challenge that allows you to help somebody else find a home for Christ in themselves. And we all know the line between belief and unbelief isn't just out there, it's within us. We are missionaries to ourselves when we hear Christ calling us, I must make a better, more complete home with you, too, though we may have been Catholic 60, 80, 100 years already. We in Holy Cross, we have lots of needs. Most pressingly, two, meeting the needs of the poorest. And you might have heard about the recent hurricane that hit the Caribbean and really caused deep devastation in Haiti, a place where Holy Cross sisters and brothers and priests have worked for years. We are helping to help rebuild that country and its schools and hospitals and other places we work with the poorest of the poor. Our second biggest need would be to establish the structures that allow us to bring young women and men into our congregations to do our work with us. Educating and forming them is not free. And we're grateful for whatever you give us to support those efforts. But the deepest goal of a mission appeal is not that you support our mission with your contributions, which we will welcome. The deepest goal of a mission appeal is that everyone in this basilica this morning and everyone listening to this on television will know that the mission of Holy Cross, sisters, brothers, and priests around the world, whether in Bangladesh or Peru or Ghana or the University of Notre Dame, is the mission of God that all of us are called to walk and to embody. Making a home in Christ ourselves, for ourselves, so that we help others make Christ have a home in their lives. Those whom you have a mission to likely won't climb a tree to make themselves known, like Zacchaeus did at Jericho that day for Jesus. Know, however, that all of us are curious about God and goodness. All of us. All of us have a longing to have God in our hearts and to embrace the goodness that God allows. Let's help each other satisfy this longing. And let's, at this Eucharist, allow Christ to satisfy our longing, for he wants to make a home with each of us, always. He invites us into our lives all the time. Let's welcome him.